Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. This is Professor Rob Fleming, the lead faculty for the Fall 2014 Sustainable Studio, and I'm going to give you a brief overview of how this works. And depending on whether you're a student, a critic, or a faculty, I'm going to give you some direction on how to use this matrix here that seems overwhelming but actually isn't. So if you'll notice over here on the left, this is like a PowerPoint slideshow. So if you ever want to just move through this linearly, you can, which is what I'm going to do right now and take you through some of the information. Excuse me. And when you actually get into this, there'll be a movie sitting right here. This is the movie I'm making right now. One of the great things about Prezi is I can have nested information within a larger slide. So if I click here, I zoom down to explain some of the issues or opportunities of the site, of the project. And I just want to let you know we're in Project 5 or Assignment 5, which is at the end here. So this is a final. And you can read this later on your own time if you'd like. I'm just giving you a brief overview. We have domain experts, which are our faculty members, and we also have visiting critics that I hope will spend some time to give some feedback to the students. And of course, the vetting instructions, the main thing here is that we're going to be using optimisms and cautions. So right here it says, as is a custom, please enter your comments as your optimisms and cautions. So we don't use typical critique style here in the online program or really in any of our programs. And you can read about that some more. The studio itself, it's one of the major courses that the students take. We have all of the information broken into 4 categories using integral theory, which is experience, culture, which are subjective, and performance/behaviors and systems, which are objective. And the students are responsible for identifying, selecting, maximizing, and integrating all 4 of these perspectives simultaneously. And that's really the key. For this studio, students were asked to focus on systems and performance because of the great need in the 21st century for us to do that. Our faculty, we had Shannon Kaplan, a mechanical engineer, Jill Kurtz, sustainable architect, myself, Lois Brink, landscape architect, and Julie Stapleton Carroll acted as the client here for the school project that we're doing. So you'll hear more about that in a minute. And sustainable design is a design process that spans multiple scales. So you'll see how we organize the final presentation to relate to the vertical scale. And then, of course, we do try to borrow as much as we can from history, from the lessons from history, but we also try to project forward, looking at resilience in the future. So that you should see some of that in some of the projects. Of course, we're looking at a collaborative transdisciplinary model, which hopefully will come out in terms of the student diversity and also the faculty diversity. The client is the Mequon School, which is a small private school in Philadelphia, just outside of Philadelphia. They want to open up an urban campus, and their goal is to increase diversity and bring more culture into the school. And their site is going to be East Falls in Philadelphia, and that should be explained by the students, the details of the site. The students, as you'll see, they'll have their name and bio here, so you'll know who those are. But just before I go further on, just a little bit of orientation. This is the orientation here. This is where the students will be posting their work, and over here is where the faculty and visiting critics will be posting their comments. As I said before, we're working in terms of scale. So global scale, regional scale, district scale, site scale, building scale, and interior scale. We didn't have time to get into the finer scales as much as we would like. And then we're also working in terms of perspective. So the behaviors or the facts or the performance perspective, the perspective of maximizing systems, the perspective of culture, and the perspective of experience. They will give you a bit of a synopsis of their research and analysis from last semester, and that should, it won't be all of it, so you'll see a link here for them that they'll provide. You go to the entire site inventory analysis, which is very in-depth. So continuing, you also notice that I have the ability to zoom in and out here with this guy, which is pretty good. And right now I'm going to go into slide 12. So here you're going to see their benchmarks from the summer, which is quantitative. You're going to see some of the conclusions from their inventory and analysis. You're going to see some of their guiding principles or their ethical foundation for the project, and you're going to see some of the inspirations they received from their case studies that they did last semester. Furthermore, oh, Jeff, that was there. Okay, great. So furthermore, now we're going to go in and just quickly go through this. So at the global scale, one of the things that we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at the facts. So here we might be concerned about climate change, or any kind of global numbers like temperature rise or changes in weather that can be measured. And one of the things I just really quickly want to just point out for the students who are also watching this movie, the way this Prezi is set up is you can nest individual drawings or information within here. So what happens is if you look over here, this new slide just dropped right in there. So if I go to the next slide, you see that it zooms right in and it's perfectly proportioned for the screen. So don't mess with the brackets and try to move them and make them squares. And you can put as many of these in here as you want, but try to keep it short and succinct. And then going forward, we're going to look at global from the systems perspective, looking at hydrology cycles, greenhouse gas interactions. So that's the reason why the temperatures are rising. Climatic cycles. Right now we're in the polar vortex, and any other systems that might bring to bear on the design of the project or how the design might have been impacted by that. Certainly global culture. I mean, we're doing a small school in Philadelphia, but there are things going on in the world that would influence the design, like the UN definition of sustainability, for example. And then experience at the global scale, this project probably wouldn't register. You think about more like Bilbao or the Eiffel Tower or some larger landmark building might have a larger global experience. We certainly don't have that here. So not all of these apply. At the regional scale, this is the Philadelphia scale, I'd like to know where we are in relation to the city of Philadelphia, and any other charts, or sorry for the typo, any other charts or demographic information at the city scale that might have importance for the design. So the students need to talk about that. At the city scale, we look at city scales like the combined sewer system, which is a huge driver of the design for this project, or the regional transit routes, or the biomes. For example, we have a river going by the site. So how do those larger regional scales affect the design, or how does the scale affect those? At the regional scale, in terms of intention, meaning, and ethics, we can look at the Philadelphia Greenworks Plan and City 25 for clues as to how this project is framed in the context of the city. And then, although this is a neighborhood building, the building is right along Kelly Drive in Philadelphia, and the students will show you that when they show you their site plan. So there's a little bit of a regional or city impact here, because many people come in and out of the city that way. At the district scale, and we're using the term district and not neighborhood or community because we're moving to an eco-district model of understanding projects, we want to really understand the site plan and context of the community, any other factual elements of the community such as population, demographics, history, historical facts and figures that might have an influence on the design. At the same time, we want to understand some of the community systems, certainly the transportation systems, another typo there, the local ecology, the impact of the river, all of the kind of neighborhood scale systems that might impact the project. Culture, how did the building reinforce or not reinforce the culture of the community? The students did research on this, so they should be able to talk about how the design of the building and site building related to that. And finally, what's the sensory experience at the community or district scale? Obviously, this building / site will be viewed from far away, so how does that begin to work out? At the site scale, we start to get into some of the plans and drawings you might expect, like a site plan, roof plan, a site section, but you'd also start to see some of the calculations, like the stormwater calculations, and you might start to see some of the more quantitative information shown here. And certainly we want to understand the site systems, especially stormwater, how it's moving, how it's collected. Green infrastructure would show up here. How do we deal with that? Moving on to the culture, how does the design of the site, the landscape, reinforce or change the culture of the client? And that needs to be shown here. And how did it create a sense of community on site? And then, of course, the experience on the site, the sights, the sounds, the smells, the spatial variation, all of these need to be shown either in a drawing or some way that you can explain that. At the building scale, we also call this the client scale. We're expecting to see, of course, floor plan sections, 3D views. And again, just to remind you, you can put as many of these down here as you want. Each one of these boxes should have a drawing in it. So this could have a floor plan, for example, and etc. So very easy to add or delete files from this. Please just don't leave the template. Spend a lot of time on this. The building systems, HVAC. This was actually meant to be for the site, the soils, etc. But all of the systems, how do we move through it vertically, horizontally? How do we get heating and cooling and plumbing, and lighting, and how do we get all those systems at the building scale working to the most efficiency? And certainly the client, again, just like the site, how does the building slash here in the building reinforce the culture of the client. And the experience. What are the sensory experiences that might occur? How do I enrich those? How do I evoke emotions in the space and create memories would be great. And then for those of you who could get to the independent project, we want to do the same thing at the room scale, where the students did an independent investigation, usually of daylighting, of how they could begin to do that. So here you would see some of the foot candle measurements that the students were able to receive. And here is how did they achieve those foot candles that were so well diversified and spread out in the space. We'll look at some of the room design itself on how that reinforces the culture. You wouldn't expect to see desks lined up in a room here. And finally, some of the sensory experiences at the scale of the room. And here I actually spell them out for you. So although it seems overwhelming, I think that most of you have most of this stuff already. Just a question of clarifying and explaining in a way that's easy for people to understand. Hope that this movie has been helpful. I look forward to having you all watch this movie again and again and again, as I'm sure you find it enjoyable, and looking forward to the students filling out these matrices.